Welcome. We're having an episode of Connect This. Not as good as when I really get it right. Connect This. And we have our all-star lineup back. I'm very excited for our common recurring, super popular panelists. We're going to be talking today about a bunch of really exciting stuff. We're talking about digital redlining. That's probably come last. We're going to talk about microtrenching. We're going to talk about the new Treasury bill, the Treasury rules that are going to distribute $10 billion on broadband. And spoiler alert, we're not going to complain too much about them. And we're going to start off talking as well about maybe a little bit about what Kim and I have been up to down in Houston. So let me introduce our crew today. We have Kim McKinley, who's at Utopia and therefore is part of the St. Thomas or the Thomas More fan club. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you. Coming live from the Houston airport today.
Yes, where you were just at the broadband communities where you were on every other panel and did a great job.
Thank you. Not overexposed at all. We're really excited to be here today. Thanks, Chris.
You did a great job, especially on the panel that I was on with you. That was the most fun one.
I don't even think you watched the other ones, though.
Yeah, but I knew that you were really good. We also have returning Doug Dawson, who is with CCG. He runs the Pots and Pans kitchen sales department of Pots and Pans by CCG.com. One of the things I heard from multiple people down in Houston is how they start off their day reading your post of the day on that site, Doug.
Well, thank you, Chris. Before we get going today, I do want to bring up something real quick. We've talked every single All-Star episode about the supply chain, and I hope we don't lose two panelists on this, but you do realize there is now a major supply chain issue with chicken wings, right? So chicken wings are in very short supply.
You know, I was taking a little bit of a health break in that I was trying to slightly be healthy lately, and I did not know that. Now I feel like that was a bad timing.
Chris, I saw you eat the other night at the barbecue joint. I don't know how well your health break is going.
There was no wings. Pit Barbecue in Texas, quite good. We also have Travis Carter with Uzi Fiber. That's USI Uzi Fiber, selling inaccurate firearms from Israel. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. Nice to be back. I don't have anything to say. Welcome. Welcome back.
I'm excited, Travis. You and I, we have a great. So last week we had a really fun show, which Travis could not participate as much. But you're back now. You're on Fiber. You're doing great. We have a show next week with these two clowns again, Kim and Doug. We're going to talk about permitting and right of way, which is going to be so much fun. We're probably going to do it live and in person at my office because my whole crew is going to be there. And then we have like another 3 or 4 shows lined up after that. We have so much good stuff coming. It's very exciting, Travis.
Oh, hold on. I'm coming to your office next week.
I'm hoping so.
Nice. I'll be there.
And I'm Christopher Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, where I travel around and talk about stuff and take credit for my colleagues' work. We're going to be talking about a lot of really exciting stuff today, but I wanted to kick off with a really interesting quote that I read from a comment on Doug's blog, which comes from somebody who goes by Robert S. Doug wrote a post about technology neutrality within the federal government when it comes to spending broadband, which Travis has harped on about many times on the show, and just how it's ridiculous what we put money into in terms of being viable in the future. So that's another post that, Doug, I saw a lot of people in social media commenting about, and you're riffing on Chris Ali, who wrote a great book, Farm Fresh Broadband. Is that
Farm Fresh Broadband? Yes.
And Chris Ali is someone that I have a lot of admiration for at the University of Virginia. Anyway, Doug does a great post about that. And here's a quote from Robert S. Says, maybe Uncle Sam should decouple the definition of broadband from the FCC. There's a standard setting agency, NIST, at the Commerce Department. NIST is where I go to set the clocks on my cameras, things like that. And they should be tasked with reviews of internet speeds. He says quadrennial, but I actually just say maybe it should be tasked with reviewing internet speeds based on real world tests. And they would set the definition of broadband, and the FCC would set its policy around that. Take the politics out of it, keep it in the Department of Commerce. seems like a really good question, or seems like a really good suggestion. Let me throw it to you first, Doug. What do you think? And this is the quick response area.
I absolutely love it because the FCC has made their response political instead of factual. So we have to get politics out of it.
And Kim, how do you react to it?
Okay, first of all, I didn't listen to the question. What was the question?
Should we use the definition of broadband set by NIST within the Department of Commerce, which sets other standards of weights and measures and things like that?
Absolutely not. I agree with Doug on this. Politics shouldn't be in the business of broadband. It's just ridiculous. Ridiculous.
So then I think you do want NIST to set it, because the claim is that there would be less politics there. It'd be more like the pointy-headed bureaucrats that were focused on it.
Fair enough. This is why I shouldn't do a podcast from an airport. Is probably the case I'm learning right now.
Travis, what are your thoughts?
Let's go to Travis. Yes, let's go to Travis.
Travis on weather.
Is this still a debate? I thought we'd already figured out on a couple episodes ago it was a gig symmetrical fiber only.
Well, so like this is like the question of like what the market might consider to be a smart investment and future proof. When it comes to federal programs, they are very legalistic, and this is where it comes down to setting things like who's eligible for access and things like that. So,
who is the most effective at our government of actually getting something done?
I think NIST does really well. I think Kim is volunteering that Utopia is the most effective.
I am, because I mean, like, what is effective in government besides like Utopia? I mean, not to toot our own horns, but how many governmental agencies are a success in the federal government?
Yes, I think there we get into this issue of whether states had different standards of broadband, which they do, and that would be a pain for industry if they had to deal with that. I don't always feel so bad about the patchwork of small things, but I think it's a brilliant idea, and it'd be really nice if that would take the politics out of it, or maybe it would just end up ruining NIST.
Well, give me a history lesson. Who set the power standard? Which government entity back in the day?
FERC.
FERC?
I think the power standard may have been set before FERC existed, though.
You think?
I think it was probably like a voluntary thing that the monopolies
the industry made their own original manuals, but FERC would have codified it, right? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does FERC still exist?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
My vote is FERC. They did a heck of a nice job on the power.
Yeah, except for Texas.
Where FERC is mostly ignored, specifically like Texas is designed to ignore FERC. This actually gets Doug and I can continue our spat from social media, where I was ragging on the way we deal with power, and Doug said it's perfectly reasonable and intelligent even.
That'd be the end of the show. That's all we talk about.
Well, maybe we'll save it for the end of the show.
And Kim would go, I don't know what you just talked about. So.
So I vote for.
We're talking about power now, Doug. We got veered off. We veered off here.
We did.
Isn't this a podcast about broadband?
No, it is. But actually, I mean, I think it's relevant that when we look at something which has gone so far astray and is so broken, that we look at something which has worked fairly well, we believe, and we try to draw some lessons from it. So I will defend our excursion down the rat hole on that basis. But taking your point, we can move on to Telecom Peekaboo quick. So this is downtown St. Paul. Henry, our producer, is putting up this image. I took this. It's a little bit far away. You can't really tell, but this is downtown St. Paul. It's on Robert Street, right where Sawat D, wonderful Thai place, is. And what I thought was interesting, and I didn't get a photo of it, but this is a typical sort of small cell. But it was literally, I would say, 150 yards from another pole that looked more or less identical in each direction. And I was surprised, and I was curious, Doug and Travis in particular, if you have any thoughts about that. Like, why would they be going like 500 feet apart rather than more like 1,000 feet apart or 2,000 feet apart? It seemed like it was way closer than I would have expected. I mean, this is St. Paul. It's not like Manhattan by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, was it the same carrier on each?
Yeah, my guess is different carriers. Yeah,
but it looked like those are microwave panels in the bottom, right? The flat panels. Or those are like backhaul?
Radio antenna. Yeah, they're directional antennas. Yeah.
Well, I assume that those are directional, and they were basically pointing at each other. It looked like that. And so I do think it looked like it was all the same gear, and so it wouldn't surprise me if they were different. That would make more sense. But it looked to me like they were part of the same. And they were also on the other two were on the opposite side of the street. So it looked like maybe they're just trying to get a different coverage pattern or something.
Yeah. I think Verizon over there did all that work, didn't they, in Minneapolis and St. Paul? So
they might be experimenting with different ways of doing the millimeter wave, stuff. And so that might just be a trial, because most of them I've seen are 800 to 1,000 feet. So 500 is awfully close. So.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely like, like the middle of a city block to the next middle of the city block. It was not very far.
Is there a skyway in between them?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, next time I should take better photos, but I started eating and forgot about it.
A picture of the other one, it might be interesting.
Yeah. So let's move on to our first topic. We've got a bunch of topics today, and I think the first thing we should talk about is Treasury. We should get it done quickly. We should move on to microtrenching, where we'll spend a lot of time, I hope, talking about it. And Kim, I don't know if Roger's still there, if he's one of the folks in the audience, but he can certainly jump in, share any photos if he'd like to. You can.
I lost him. He's probably in a massage chair somewhere, like in the airport.
Because Roger's been collecting pictures of microtrenching. We'll come to that in a second. So Treasury released the rules. Doug, per usual, you probably read them very closely. I read them last night on the plane. And I waited a week to really dig into them, and I was super happy. This is the American Rescue Plan passed a bunch of different buckets of money. This is the bucket of money of $10 billion that can basically only be used for capital stuff, which means like broadband networks or maybe laptops and other computer devices, in which it will improve broadband connectivity for health and employment reasons and stuff like that. So we finally got the rules for that, and the states will qualify for this money. So Doug, what are your top line takeaways?
Well, first off, it was exactly what you would have hoped for. If I were to written my own list, that was pretty much it. They give the money to the states. The states are going to get to pick the projects. There is no tie-in at all to FCC mapping, so they can set their own definition of what they want to have served. It's going to be available in cities to get broadband to poor neighborhoods. It's going to be available in rural areas. States are going to be able to set their own thing. That part's both good and bad, because that means in California it'll all go to AT&T, but most states will do a good job with it. So there will be states that really muck it up. It doesn't really have much in the way of computers and all. The states actually would have to still retain ownership of computers for some very odd reason. So I think that maybe they're going to give some lending units to libraries or something. I think that's a really tiny part of it. But it's, the speeds are great. You can't, they really want you to not, the definition of what is broadband is 100 by 20. And so, that completely eliminates DSL. Unfortunately, the only downside I see is that leaves in the cable companies and the wireless companies, but that's the state's call if they want to give money to those things or not. So,
yeah, there's broad latitude if the state, or presumably if the state's working with local governments, to define areas as saying, yes, perhaps there's widespread cable availability, but there's other reasons that there are lacking access that is effective. And so it's very open to interpretation.
Well, when you start matching that up with the ARPA money the communities got, and there's going to be some pretty good projects coming out of this. So, yeah, there's a few small states that'll probably actually have a hard time even spending it all. It goes from 125 up to 600 or 700 million, according to the size of the state, and it's some crazy FCC formula. But there's a few states like Rhode Island. There's really not much that doesn't already have FiOS there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. So,
and just to be clear with the numbers that Doug was throwing out, it's areas that are eligible or areas that have less than 100. Well, and a lot of this was suggested language too, but areas that have less than
everything in the whole thing is suggested.
There was one or two required. There was one or two here or there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And but generally, if you don't have 100 down, 20 up, you qualify. That's a reliable, all times a day.
Reliable was the great word. Yes.
Right, and they were pretty clear about it. This is what we were hoping for with the definitions from the previous program. We didn't quite get there, although it's still aggressive cities, I think, would be smart to still use this rules effectively for the other ones too, for the rescue plan dollars. But then if you build, once again, you have to build to 100 megabits symmetrical. So that is a requirement. And if there's a really good reason, if you're the city of Columbus and you're looking at trying to do CBRS, and maybe you can't do 100 megabits symmetrical on CBRS, but you still think it's a really good idea, then you can work with Treasury. You can do 100 down, 20 up potentially. So there's some flexibility there for certain circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be better. So,
yeah. So that's exciting. I just want to put that out there. I don't want to be the negative Nellies who are only ragging on government agencies when they get things wrong. I think this is broadly right. I really salute the hard work that went into it. And I'm glad that, I think Angelina, who we talked about last week, Angelina Panettiere from National League of Cities, deserves a lot of credit for making sure the cable companies don't dominate Treasury.
The biggest downside of the whole thing is there's a number of states who don't really have a broadband office put together yet. And they're going to have a challenge using it. So.
Well, Michigan has a broadband office, but it's not staffed.
Right.
But that's the thing. It's like Michigan has an office, but they don't staff it. So
right.
I don't know how that works entirely.
It's going to be a bit of a challenge for those folks because they're going to be processing these grants. So,
yes.
Are these grants for new construction or
yes.
to bring service? Because what we're seeing is that the cities that got that, what was the last handout that happened? What did you guys
also the rescue plan?
Yeah. It's instead of weekly peekaboo, we should have government program of the week. So
I don't know. I mean, if you spend 60 hours a week, you can keep track of all this in your head.
So whichever one it was, where all the cities got a little slice. What they're starting to do around here now is instead of investing in build, they're just investing in the incumbent cable company's low-cost connectivity product to get people connected right away, and they're going to use it all up on that.
Wow, that's sad. This one is infrastructure. So
only. So they have to actually build something with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, there's one other thing that I thought was interesting, which I didn't realize, but someone in Houston pointed out to me related to all this, which is that Title I schools, which are pretty common in more urban areas, everyone who attends a Title I school is qualified for EBB. And I thought that was interesting because I never really quite put that together, because a Title I school, every child gets a free and reduced lunch. Therefore, they all would qualify for EBB. And so I feel like that's some messaging that could be useful, making sure that people don't feel like, oh, maybe it doesn't apply to me. No, you got a kid in one of these schools, boom, you could get the EBB.
Yeah, but remember, EBB doesn't actually pay any money. You just get to send in bills. So month 3, $0.
So you haven't received any money yet? I was curious about that.
No.
And you're going to get a giant check one day to catch up, probably. Well, that's how it goes. It might be next July.
If you're a small provider, that's I've been there where cash is tight. You can't wait around like this.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Kim, have you had a better experience with that?
With the EBB program, or are you talking about the broadband program?
The EBB. I'm just curious if you've seen anything back. You're using it, aren't you?
So we have it qualified. We have not implemented it yet, but some of our providers have, and they're not seeing a huge uptake in people who are signing up for EBB. And I think this is what we, like at the conference we just saw, was that a lot of people, the federal government marketed the EBB to the providers, but the providers have no incentive to market to the end user. And that is one of the biggest fundamental problems with the EBB and how it was launched.
Yeah, so, I do think we saw the numbers for Utah and they weren't great. I think AARP Utah might help market that around a little bit. Some of the other nonprofits would be great. Travis, have you had problems submitting your numbers into it? Have you stopped just trying to submit your numbers? You had a real problem with that originally.
We figured out a manual approach of how to do it. So we've been submitting the automated process wasn't working well. So we've just been submitting them monthly manually. And so it hasn't been good. So, but backtracking to this other thing, can we track some of these dollars, like pick a state and actually see what happens? Because I'm always curious where this money goes. It seems to just disappear into the ether. And it'd be nice to actually go and see where they used it.
I will be tracking several states that I'm heavily involved in. Yeah, so
Good.
I'm very interested too. So yeah.
Isn't it like usspending.gov or usaspending.gov is sort of a place you could go and start digging around?
Oh man, to put it together out of there is really hard.
So how do you track it?
I track it locally because like in North Carolina, I know where everyone's talking about it. We know what's going on. So so it's not that hard to track your own state. Yeah.
Do you think any of the larger cities are going to get some of it, or is it all going to go rural like everything else?
Oh, well, that's up to the state. In this state, it's mostly going to go rural,
Okay.
but that's up to the state. So there's definitely states who are going to, like, I'm pretty sure Illinois is going to give some to cities. So it just depends on the state. So.
Okay.
Kim?
Yeah, and I just have a question. Like, so with the federal government, we went over the first hurdle of the federal government and not like effing this up. So why do we not think that the states aren't going to eff it up when they disseminate the money? Like,
some will be horrible. Some will absolutely fall on their face and be dreadful. But there's probably 30 who will do a great job, 10 who will muck it up some, and 10 who will fail spectacularly. We have states. I'm in one of them. There's a good chance in this state it all goes to charter. I mean, that's what we do with grant money here. So who knows?
One of my friends down in Houston kept reminding me that Charter is talking about how they're not going to do almost anything for 5 or 10 years with that RDOF money.
Wow.
I don't know where he's picked that up, but he's someone who tracks this stuff pretty closely, and he feels like that they're seeing signs and sort of quiet notes to communities. Don't expect an immediate investment from those territories that Charter won. So I don't know, because I've heard elsewhere that I feel like Charter's pulling permits in some places. So
I've heard here they're pulling some rural permits. So we'll see.
Yeah.
And
It could be selective. Could be selective by state. I mean, that's not.
How does it work though? Like with these grants, because we're now up to a 40% material price increase since January 1st. How does that get factored into it?
It doesn't at all. Your grant doesn't go up 1 penny. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Really. Yep.
just less projects, Travis. Just less projects is what happens.
Wow. Okay.
So let's talk about microtrenching. This is something that had come up. It's something that I've been sort of curious about. I've been super dismissive of because, and I think we talked about it briefly before, and then some folks from a major company sort of convinced me that they had actually worked with materials scientists and found different compositions in different areas and getting the proper rates of expansion and compression and that they could make it work well. And then Kim and her boss, Roger's listening in and maybe sharing some photos with us to put up on the screen, have experience with it out in Utah. And sure doesn't seem to be as good as some people are saying it is. So I figured Doug would have opinions. And I'm curious if we talk first about just what it does to the roads. I really want to dig in with Travis about what it does to the network when you build that kind of way.
Well, first off, I'm a fan of it in the right places. We helped to put it into a major airport. It was way cheaper to run around the tarmac and bring the fiber into the terminals than to try to snake it through all the stupid ceilings and tunnels. And so that was a great project. And they came along behind it and they painted a bright yellow line that says fiber, 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 so no one ever digs it up. You know, it's going to be safe for a very long time. Perfect use of it. Campuses, any place where you can control the digging. The problem I have with it is not even the technology, because they will get that right, I believe. But I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and what got my attention was in the first year I lived here, they did an emergency dig at one end of my block for a major water pipe break. Within the year, they did a major cut at the other end of the block for a gas leak. And so that got me asking questions around the city. And my city of about 100,000 people averages one major emergency dig with a backhoe every day. And they cut out 3, 4, 5, 6 feet along the side of a street when they do those. And if you microtrench that into anywhere near within 3 or 4 feet of the curb, that's 365 fiber cuts a year. Absolutely unsustainable. And they don't get repaired fast. This is not the kind of cut that people run out. It could be open for a week or two. So fiber gets cut and you just don't have broadband for 2 weeks until the gas line's fixed. And I don't see a practical use for it in city streets. I see very good practical uses for it in places where you're pretty sure you're not going to dig. It could be a great thing to do along the shoulders of roads along interstates. I mean, there's a lot of places it makes sense, but not where people live. So.
They did it in a major telecom provider in the city of Salt Lake, did it right in front of my house. And I have pictures. Some of these might be the ones that Roger has taken as well, because he came and viewed it. And he said to me, is it funny that the worst microtrenching I've ever seen is right in front of your house? And I mean, legit, the roads were falling apart. The microtrenching was supposed to be like just a cut. And I mean, the road was like crumbling right around it. There were potholes that they left uncovered. I mean, it was a disaster. And I mean, like people were falling in them. I mean, like lawsuits are happening because of it. It's just not practical. And construction practices are one thing, but what we saw, I actually went out there with a tape measure and I was like, okay, they say this is going to be 8 inches deep. It went from 4 inches at some spots to 16 within like a foot and a half. I mean, it looked like a drunk person went down the road with a machine to get it done. I don't know why cities are letting this happen to their roads.
The reason that happens is it only works if the streets are in good condition. A lot of streets are not in good condition. If the streets already got structural problems, it just crumbles the heck out of it.
And that's where I feel like we can talk about 2 separate sets of discrete situations. One would be areas that never freeze, and the other is places that have regular freeze and thaw cycles. Because, in Southern California and even in Northern California, I think Sonic is pushing very hard to do a lot more microtrenching, and Dane Jasper has it together, right? I mean, we should probably have him on the show to talk more about this, because I have the same questions you do, Doug. To me, it seems like microtrenching saves you some capital expense, but then it drives your operating expense through the roof, and that doesn't seem like a very good trade to me, from what I understand of the business.
And then even in Northern California, every 30 to 40 to 50 years, they rip a street 2 feet deep and repave it. There goes your entire fiber network for 4 months. I mean, they don't fix those things for quite a while. And it's like, gee, that's not really a good idea. And so it's going to get disrupted in major ways. I love the idea. I don't see the execution ever working in busy places. So.
Right.
But you can't. Every provider can't go down the street and microtrench.
Oh my gosh!
Another thing.
If we had 6 microtrenches on a street, the street is absolutely going to cave.
But even then, Kim actually makes a practical argument that you can't have a second microtrench. Explain that, Kim.
I agree.
Yeah, you can't microtrench doubly down the street, so you have one provider. And I mean, I'll put a plug out for open access.
You explained it to me just yesterday. Oh, you said because it's so hard to cross. You gotta keep crossing the other microtrench.
Well, sometimes I speak, Chris, and I don't remember what I said 2 days ago.
You say so many great things, you can't possibly remember them all.
Well, the issue is intersections. You can't do intersections with 2 people.
You can't. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to have it's going to be a whole puzzle of fiber in your streets. But I mean, unless you're doing open access networks and you're only doing it once, right? Then it possibly could work, but that's not going to happen either, right?
Now this looks like a microtrench on a good road, right? I mean, this is like a pretty well maintained road. It looks like. Yeah. Do we have any photos from Roger of Kim's house?
I have some. No, I have some.
Anywhere the address is legible, so we can just drop by Kim's place sometime.
Oh, the pictures from Louisville are just amazingly hard.
Well, that was actually like nano trenching, right? And that was sort of an experimental thing.
Yeah.
But let me ask. Do you want me to email them to you, Chris, or how do you want me to give them to you?
Yeah, let me. Well, you should email them to Rye and Henry. If you just respond to the invite and just blast them there, then they'll take care of them.
I gotcha.
And Travis, how are you reacting to this? I mean, I assume that this is something that you haven't just evaluated, but you have time and time again come back to see how it's changed and things like that.
This was an interesting concept 8 years ago. It's, as Doug and Kim alluded to, I mean, the practical application of this, yes, if you want to run across property you own and you're going to control, sure, it might be an interesting approach. But to run up and down every road in every city, first off, remember, there's different divisions in most cities, and your street division, the last thing, just even trying to get them to approve doing this. And then how do you get from the road to the house? So now you got to saw through the concrete curb to get up there and the repair. I just don't, at least in the applications we've worked in, the public right of way is the perfect place to put conduit. It's easy to work in, it's easy to repair, easy to dig down. Doing adds, moves, and changes is relatively easy. So I don't really, how much do you really save in the long term here? And quite frankly, when the internet's down, you can't tell people it's going to be a week or two before you're back up and running. I mean, just even telling them it's going to be an hour or two, they just lose the plot.
Travis, when you say the right of way, just explain for a second what that is.
Well, so, and again, and this is particularly talking about the experiences I have in cities I've worked in, is usually it's the space between the curb and either the sidewalk or 10 to 12 feet into the front of somebody's yard. Now, 99% of the people have no idea that the yard they've been taking care of, mowing, shoveling, whatever they've been doing for all these years actually doesn't belong to them. But for the most part, there is public right of way in most parts of in the cities we've worked in. Now, Doug and Kim might talk. Very rarely have we run into a place where we can't use the public right of way to serve a customer. Minneapolis has the Minneapolis Park Board, which blocks all underground utilities on it. So there's a few people in Minneapolis that we aren't able to serve, but everybody else we can get to. And I wouldn't microtrench. I mean, you just don't save enough money to make it worthwhile.
The issue you run into, you're alluding to, Travis, in every city, there are some streets that the city doesn't control. Almost every city has private streets.
Yeah.
Where somebody, the house people put their own streets in, even in the middle of a big city. So you get this real mix of private streets, city streets, state streets, federal streets, all running, and each one of those has a different set of rules. It's a nightmare to get this thing done.
And I don't know about you, Doug, but the private streets we have in Minneapolis have been the easiest to get approved.
I have had, well, you would not for this microtrenching. There's some of
no.
They pay for their own roads, and they're going, you're not going to cut my concrete. I can promise you.
I think Kim's trying to jump in.
Use their right of way. It's been really easy because 80% of the houses want fiber internet. So you just go, well, we got to go down your road there. Do you mind?
Right.
Everyone signs.
Yep.
I do love that my face is still, but I can see all of you, and everybody else is moving except me.
You're frozen, and at least it's not in an embarrassing position. That's good.
I'm frozen, but you're not all frozen. I'm just frozen on the screen.
Yeah, I like Roger's point. Unless there's absolutely no other way to do it,
right?
I would consider it. But when we went to the city of Minneapolis and said, hey, we want a microtrench, and we went to the roads, they're like, yeah, that's not happening.
I mean, we're looking at a road right now that's going down. On one side, there's a cliff that falls off 100 feet. On the other side, it goes straight into a federal park, and there's absolutely no shoulder. Microtrenching is going to be the only option on that road. That's rare. That's the first time I think we've ever had that. So,
Kim, what are we looking at here?
That is right in front of my on the corner.
Wow, look at that! What a disaster!
That's just that the road was legit just crumbling, and they left that there for weeks after it was. They did it, and now you just watched it, and you're like, oh gosh.
And there's no easy fixing that. That's a destroyed road. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's going to have pothole problems for the rest of life.
No, the argument though is that if we allowed microtrenching, we'd have a lot more competition. Now, I feel like we've addressed this a little bit sideways and saying, well, maybe one more entity would come in, but it probably wouldn't be very reliable service. But I think we're about to see sci-fi experiment with all kinds of microtrenching, because that's their main method of execution from what I can tell. And they're claiming that they're doing 6 cities with 24 more on the way or something like that.
Yeah, but what's their rationale? Is it just purely they're trying to save a few dollars?
I believe so, yes.
So you're building a 100-year asset and cheaping out on the front end. That makes sense.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be interesting to see if they can deploy it, because I think they're saying it's easier to deploy so they can get into and connect people faster. But is faster better if the infrastructure doesn't last as long?
Yeah, you sort of wonder. I mean, like, you get to the point where you're like, all right, well, you got the customers hooked up. Now let's immediately build our new network properly with that money we're making. It seemed like maybe the numbers will work out all that well.
It seems how we always go back to the same thing. It's kind of the 25-3 conversation. Fund all these companies to build these networks that you basically have to redo in 3 to 4 years. Microtrenching is the fiber equivalent in my eyes.
So
I think it's going to be. I think, Travis, you're absolutely right, but we're not looking at 20 years down the road. These programs they say they're looking at 20 years down the road, but are they? They're really just looking at trying to stop the digital divide today. And I don't think it's really going to work either way. I think you're failing on both fronts.
Yeah, my concern is that with capital so cheap and these companies getting rolled up at such high EBITDA multiples, that we're going to have people trying to slam in anything they can slam in, get revenue, because they're going to sell their company off and make a fortune. So that's
they're going to sell it to vulture capitalists who don't really care about the business. So so now there's nobody in charge of your ISP. Right?
Here's the thing. That to me seems like one of the most accurate predictions that we've had in terms of the way things really work. It comes from Travis. Travis, remind us how many days of college you had.
I don't like to brag, but 9 in a row, just in a row, though. I want to be clear,
Right. So I want to say that I don't think there's a single business professor in this country that understands what you just described, which is what is inevitably going to happen right now.
That's exactly what's happening right now. There's all these dollars getting pumped out. Money's super cheap. Private equity is super interested in the space right now. And you know exactly what's going to happen. Slap out a network, get a bunch of EBITDA going, and sell it and go live on the beach. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, that's what
buy the beach.
So, yeah, buy the beach. Yeah, I mean, these things are selling for 20 to 28 times multiples. It's unbelievable.
That's insane.
Yeah. So,
and then in California, I think we're going to see. Go ahead, Kim. Were you trying to jump in?
I was just going to say, so Travis, when are you retiring if you could sell your company for so much money?
Well, then what do you do? That's the biggest problem. What do you do tomorrow? I won't get invited back to connect this.
Connect this?
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure that you could completely buy the rights to this show. I'm pretty sure.
If Travis wasn't on this show, there wouldn't be a show.
Well, it's what is it's back to school, Chris. It's that same old
Rodney Dangerfield. That's right.
Learning.
That's where we bonded.
Yeah. It's the fact of the matter is I think you're going to see a lot of these dollars go to subpar networks that are just I call it a publisher clearinghouse check play. People that are just wanting to make big multiples quick. But that being said, I honestly, I'm surprised you brought microtrenching up. I kind of thought it died a few years ago. I'm actually kind of
no. There's legislation in California, I believe, that would force cities to allow it. And, it wouldn't surprise me if we see that elsewhere, too, because elected officials are vulnerable to this idea that, well, cities are just too protective. They don't understand that we can do this safely now. In my mind, it's also the sort of thing where I'm like, it's freaking 2021. I bet the Romans could have figured out how to do microtrenching with their mastery of concrete. Why can't we? And so you kind of believe, probably the cities are unreasonable with their concrete policies and this and that. So probably we should let these guys microtrench. We'll have broadband competition everywhere. It'll be great. I think
I have a little hint for you, or a little statement. Directional drilling works really well, and the product you have at the end of it is exceptional. Aerial works. It works. In aerial you can at least maintain, but when you start dealing in the streets, good luck with that.
Well, that's I think
Travis. Yeah, I was going to say this.
Yeah,
Travis and I agree on something.
How do you fix a fiber?
Hold on. Sorry, let Kim go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said me and Travis actually agree on something. I think directional boring and drilling is the way to go. And I usually say that cities are the ones who think it's the right way because they're protecting their roads, they're protecting, their residents. But now Travis and we can hug it out now since we agree on something, because a private company has told me that they agree with directional boring as well.
Well, and the thing is, worst case that happens is you use these dollars, you directional bore conduit in, you have conduit in the ground. So even if the company abandons it or gets sold off to somebody else, that asset is invaluable. So
Actually, that does remind me. I mean, there is. I would say that like my friends at Duraline would probably be furious with me if I didn't note that you can actually micro trench like 4 conduits, and you can put like a micro trench that has multiple conduits in. So that's not impossible if you did want to do it in a certain way, but it suffers from all the other problems that we've talked about.
So, Chris, are we done with the microtrench conversation, or
I think so. Go ahead. Yeah,
because we play this telecom peekaboo, but I'd like to play Chris Mitchell peekaboo. We were watching TV the other night, and this very handsome man came up on the screen. So I had to take a snapshot, and I don't know, Henry, if you have it where we could share it, but who is this, and what is he doing?
That person has a very big camera right behind the bench of the female volleyball players. He might be getting in trouble.
Yes, that is Mr. Mitchell and his side job. You're not just a broadband preacher. You're also a aficionado of the camera, correct?
Yeah. If you go down, you'll see I'm protecting my knees because I'm very particular, and so I'm wearing knee pads.
Nice.
So Travis, like, were you just staring at the TV and you had to go back? Did you have to rewind, like, scroll back to get this picture? Or?
I'm like, hang on. Well, so Chris mentioned he was going to be at the game, so I happened to have it on TV, and I'm like, wow, there he is. So yes, I rewound my VCR and was able to get a shot of him. So yes.
Now here's what's freaky. I actually recorded this one, so I can go back and look. So.
Yeah.
That's right. So actually, the Maryland sports information person is a former Gopher. So I was talking with him before the game. Send him a few photos.
I just want to ask the question of how come your hair in that picture doesn't have any gray in it? How did you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm digging this out. So for people who want to see if I'm any good at it, here we go. You can go here to see the you probably I'm not going to type all that in, but like you can go to the Gopher galleries and see the 30 images I put up as highlights there. It was a pretty fun game.
So Doug, it's called Just for Men. It's like a hair dye that you can just apply. Yeah,
it's actually a filter that I asked him to put on the cameras.
Well, I think he has the one that's called Just for Games. It's just temporary.
So while we're Chris Mitchell peekaboo, huh? There you go.
And while we're off topic, I just want to say I got a brand new shirt.
Aha.
So one of our rivals, the Broadband Bunch from ETI Software. I guess Travis, you and I got to do shirts now. So.
I only do black.
It's a good looking shirt.
Yeah.
Kim, we're not going to do next week until we get a shirt.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right.
We're protesting now.
We'll turn into a fundraiser. I'll send you a quote, Doug, and I'll send you a tie-dyed Connect This shirt.
Excellent. I will wear it for sure. So.
There's an amazing company in St. Paul that does great printing, Rebel Ink printing. So I'd be very happy to work that through. So digital redlining was our last topic, I believe. This is something we've touched on a little bit before, but I was talking with a friend who's an analyst and said something that I really agree with. And I'll say that I'm deeply concerned about the practice in which I guess I would say the way we've organized broadband, in that it really encourages that low-income communities are left behind. But I also just don't like the framing around it. In that, I always think of the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio says to AT&T, we've decided that we want you to be able to build wherever you want. AT&T says, awesome. We're going to build to the place where we make the most money. And now we're going to shame AT&T for following the rules. I think we need better rules typically. And so, there's a discussion about that, but I don't like the idea of this, like of us like basically getting rid of the rules that protected smarter investments and then attacking companies for taking advantage of them. I've been talking for too much, but I'll come back to this in a little bit after I get a reaction from some other folks, because I have a whole analogy that works with it.
I'll go first. The problem is we've gutted the ability to enforce it. There's a lot of cities who try to say you can only build everywhere or nowhere at all, but in a lot of cases, the states have overridden them. And so, a lot of cities don't have the power to enforce all or nothing. And so then once you can't afford that, once you can't fix that, then people come in and build just to where they feel like. They don't always build to the richest. Some ISPs just come in and build the cheapest, the easiest construction. But the fact is when you don't build the whole city, there's neighborhoods that are left out, and then nobody else can ever make sense out of fixing the rest of it. So those neighborhoods probably never get fiber, and that's the really problem. So
Travis loves making the point. It's a dumb ISP that only builds the richest. What you want to do is build like the middle 75%, probably.
I'm absolutely a fan of that. The richest are actually probably the worst investment in the whole city. So, yep.
It's because they're rich for a reason.
Well, no, because there's only five houses per block. I mean, it's not, and half of them don't subscribe. It's really not a good investment at all usually. So.
Well, and that's the reality is everyone thinks it's purely economic. It's all about demand for the service. And we have found kind of that middle tier, the very wealthy and the very economically challenged just don't have a demand for broadband.
I was going to say, I'm going to put in my plug. And Chris, we talked about this the other day, but the only really way to end digital redlining is to start a city-owned network, because a city, and if you believe it's infrastructure, then if it's infrastructure, you have to provide it to all the residents and not just where the economics make sense. So, I mean, we all know where I stand since I work for a governmental agency.
I have to put in a plug that sort of disagrees with something Travis said earlier, because he made fun of the last grant program, but I have several client cities who are using that money to fill in the gaps in the digital divide. So that, that's a very legitimate use of these grant funds, is to go to those poor neighborhoods with it. And they may turn around and hand that off to an ISP to operate, but at least those folks get fiber. So
are they like a major NFL city, or are they?
Oh, no, not at all. More of the cities of 10 and 20 and 30,000 homes. Yeah.
And I think those, my traveling around, I think those cities have politically a much easier time than say a city the size of Minneapolis. I mean, we will get no help from any government entity, state, federal, county, Earth, galaxy, and it doesn't matter where these. We have to do it on our own.
Well, I think you have to wait until Utopia gets there. So.
Yeah, well, but the thing is that you can do a little. You can do a little bit at a time. I mean, the thing is it's the uptake just takes longer. That's what.
Right.
It isn't that there is no demand. It's just you're not going to get a 50% market share in 36 months. You might only get a 25% market share, but that's okay.
Well, let me say that.
Get there.
Let's ignore for a second that even if the emergency broadband benefit is turned into a so-called permanent program, let's ignore for a fact that it might run out of money, because it certainly could happen. But if we had a permanent program at $30 a month, do you think, Doug, that, for instance, Metronet would stop ignoring the lower income parts of town and believe that in several years they would have a much more reasonable take rate? How much does just making sure that families have more money help to resolve this?
No, and the reason they won't is because nobody in their right mind is going to believe it's permanent. Get a change in administration and a change in Congress, and that permanent thing disappears. A program like that is going to be the top of everyone's get rid of the program list for the next 40 years, and so it's never going to be safe. So if you can't rely on it, then you just pretend it's not there. So on top of that, I don't think that'll change their mind. There's a lot of ISPs that are like, I'm not messing with government money. I'm not going to apply for these subsidies. And so it's just, I don't think it changes much at all, unfortunately. So, and on top of that, broadband's going to, Comcast and Charter are going to drive prices up to $100. Whoopee, $30 off of that. Aren't we doing great? So.
Yeah. Well, I'll be curious. Maybe we should make a bet on that. Let's
chicken wings.
Yeah. I mean,
well, we can't bet for chicken wings because they're.
Yeah. There's supply chain issues. Didn't we already talk about that?
Well, this would be a long-term bet. I mean, it'd have to be like, by January 1st, 2024, will they have driven up to $100? What's the time frame, Doug?
Well, that's actually a bet. I'll take that in a second, because there's places where Comcast is already at $92 for raw internet, so this is an easy bet.
Well, okay. So I mean, I think we'd have to come up with some sort of average based on the work that you do, like an entire community average.
No, yeah, that gets harder because of the specials and the this and that and the other thing. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What the trouble is, nobody knows what happens in a bundle. Those bundles are always going to nag us. I think the price. I think it's in there. I just don't. We can't find it. So yeah.
Okay. I think, Doug, you're also worried because I think we all thought I had a very safe bet in February, and now we all know that I'm going to be paying some chicken wings, which might only be like 3 chicken wings per visit, apparently.
Chris, the trivia though is there's not really there's a lot. They're double the price of that last year. So
Still a smart investment. I mean, I would pay for them at 10x. So the thing that I mean, this one of the things I feel about, like, that I get frustrated about, and I mean, it's weird for me to be defending AT&T, but like, I always come back to, we live in a society in which we're supposed to set the rules, and I view companies like AT&T, Charter Spectrum as like, they're like tigers, out there, and they're going to rip your face off if you give them a chance, and that's why we need to have rules that protect the people who visit the zoo from the animals that they go to see. And then we have politicians that let the zookeepers run out among the people. And it's like, do you blame the tiger for taking advantage of being let out of the cage around a bunch of people? No, like, that's the nature of the tiger. And I feel like this idea of like, well, let's just deregulate. And I mean, we go back to Texas, or not Texas. I was thinking of Florida, where you have AT&T goes to the legislature and says, what'd be really cool? It'd be really cool if after a hurricane, we didn't have to rebuild. And the Florida legislature, including the governor, are like, yes, that is smart. That is really a good idea. And then a hurricane comes 6 months later, and everyone's on TV saying, I can't believe AT&T. How could they not rebuild? This is atrocious. Like, that's the sort of stuff I just hate. That posturing is just ridiculous. We need to set good rules.
I mean, monopolies are going to be monopolies, and so and they will bribe their way to anything, and so they always get their way if you don't have ironclad rules. So every time, not once in a while, every time.
And this gets back to, I'll bring Kim back into it, where like, I feel like Kim and I are probably pretty much on the same wavelength in that we're not expecting the rules to be good given the kind of corruption in the system that we have. And so that's why we're so strong of cities building the network, because then they can set the rules. They're not dependent on the state or the federal government to be smart when it comes to AT&T or Charter Spectrum or Comcast lobbying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Chris. I mean, campaign donations speak a lot. And if you don't have campaign donations involved in the decisions, smarter decisions get made. Not to say that city officials don't get some campaign donations, but they're not nearly at the level as some of the federal government and the state legislators are.
Now we have to worry that city officials are going to be talked into microtrenching. This is never going to end, Travis.
So we did miss a good comment, which was a friend from San Francisco who's in a position to know, who says microtrenching is far more for small cell networks than broadband, at least in San Francisco. And I'm sorry, I didn't see that when it first came out, but very relevant, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes a lot more sense, because Travis had the great point of, every house you have to also go through the curb, so for small cells, that's way less of a problem. So, yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about microtrenching, if you need to run a backbone through the downtown corridor where you're not going to do any drops. You're not going to do any ad drops off the, maybe it would work there. But, one thing that Doug said that resonates, you guys are always talking about government taking care of this problem. But what happens today when, let's say, the city of St. Paul has they're super excited about building this network, and then none of those people get reelected in 4 years, and then the project's just dead. I think that's very relevant here, because these networks, I mean, they're big, they're complicated to run, they require a lot of maintenance, a lot of break fix, and if you don't have the support of the long term, how do you plan on running?
Yeah, Kim.
Well, I think that's where Utopia has done a really good job of we have 2 boards, and it's like city managers. We try not to politicize it at all. So city managers are going to be a long-term employment usually, and they don't politicize the decisions, which I think we've done a really incredible job of taking the politics out of building the Utopia fiber network.
Should they, do they report to like a city? Do you guys report to like a city council or a governor or a mayor or something? How does that
So
work?
the board members are usually affiliated with the city, and I mean their city, they get input from their city, but for the most part, they get to make the call that is best for the organization. But one thing that is different about Utopia is their input or their vote is dependent on their city size too. So like we have 11 members of our board, the Utopia board, and we have cities as big as West Valley, who is the second biggest city in Utah, down to little tiny cities called like Tremont. But West Valley has a bigger share of the votes because they have more like financial risk.
But I think the safety in that is when you have that many different cities voting, they're not likely to go do something political or they're going to talk unless they're all somehow bribed. I mean, safety in numbers is a really good feature as well. So,
yep. Well, do you have your own P&L then? I mean, are you operating under some government-controlled financing, or can you operate independently?
We are a interlocal agency in the state of Utah, Travis. Don't you know what we're made of? Like our forming documents? Come on.
In those 9 days, he didn't focus on interlocal
I have no
agencies.
idea what that means. So yes, okay.
He knew that. He knew that. He just didn't know what it was.
Yeah. I'm just curious if how it would work. Like if you're the city of, I don't know, pick a city, Denver, Colorado. You know, is this going to be the IT department that would roll out these networks, or is this an independent?
See, now you're talking. That's the first in Denver. That's the first 3 to 4 year fight, just deciding which department it is. And I'm not kidding you.
Really? No, I believe you. And this is actually, I think it's very important. Like for people who may not understand this, like IT is not building networks. IT may be managing certain kinds of aspects of some networks, but like building and operating a commercial fiber optic network is not a job for IT typically.
No.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, IT basically orders from CenturyLink or Comcast to circuit. That's all they do. They're not going to build outside in the street. So it's interesting. I'm just curious how it works.
Well, I wanted to jump in for a second because, like, when you're in multi-city, it's one thing. One of the things that I really encourage, to the extent that anyone listens to me about this, which is very rare because it's Doug's job typically to give this advice, is that I would say that cities want to build a network that is insulated from day-to-day politics, is the way I say it. And a way to do that we've seen from 100 years of electric experience with cities is you have a board and you have staggered terms so that if you have a sudden change in city council, they might be able to shift 1 or 2 people on the board of that organization, but that board is insulated from the kind of day-to-day politics that happens. And that's a really smart thing to do for anything that has a long life.
Absolutely, Chris. I mean, that's the only way you're going to get these networks built. And I agree with you, Travis, too, that we hear all the time at Utopia that we'll hear from cities and they're like, well, we put our IT guy in charge of figuring out what network to build and how to build it. And you're like, the IT guy just feels overwhelmed and doesn't go anywhere with it because they have no idea what to do.
Well, my experience with government has been is if they don't have somebody to call and yell at, they're not, when you have only yourself to call and yell at, if something is not working, that's where the whole problem kind of falls apart. So I guess I was and I don't know if Kim noticed this with Utopia, but what we noticed in Minneapolis, when we got to about 5,000 subscribers on the fiber network, the political issues all disappeared because the conversation was, well, what do you want me to tell all these other, I always call them taxpayers. That kind of irritates them, but they're constituents. What do you want me to tell the other constituents that want this, but you're in the way? And then that knocked a lot of roadblocks down.
Yeah, I mean, after Utopia became operationally break even and we had a pathway to build out the original 11 cities, a lot of all the games and complaining kind of stopped. But in the beginning, when you were like, what city's going to get built first, what neighborhood's going to built first, there were a lot of people who tried to politicize it, but we do not see that anymore. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, the early years of Utopia were quite an ugly mess, but they got over it. So.
Travis, yet again, it's when they hired me. Haven't we gone over this before?
Yeah, and I'm curious, Doug, because you think about these things. I think some cities have started having CTOs, chief technical officers or chief technology officers. I think technical is more common. That is a person that is more likely to be involved at this sort of a thing. Is that right?
I don't view them all that differently than the IT department. So, the fact is, the only cities who really do this right have an electric utility. The other cities have not. There are a few who don't have electric utilities who do a good job, but they almost had to create a brand new utility because you need to put engineers and guys in trucks and cherry pickers in charge of it, not anybody from the city organization. And so I don't normally see any actual city people having anything to do with any successful network. It just doesn't work that way. So
the two examples I come up with immediately are Fair Lawn, Ohio, and Sandy, Oregon. Sandy, Oregon did what you just said. Basically, they built a whole new utility, effectively. Hillsboro, Oregon, is one. I think they're effectively doing that now. They're quite large, but also quite wealthy in ways that a number of other larger cities are not. Hillsboro is a suburb of Portland, for folks who aren't familiar, and it's quite wealthy. But yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see more and more cities embracing the kind of model that Utopia has, in part because they will be able to get by with doing less of some of the kind of stuff that Travis has specialized in.
But how does, we talk about these cities, but how do residents of, I don't know, let's pick a city, Los Angeles, get this service? We talk about these small cities. We never really mention the big ones. Are they just left out of the conversation?
They're always left out. Yeah, no big city is going to do this on their own. It's never going to happen. So,
because it's too political. Big cities
There's another
can't
bet.
get out of their own way.
There's a bet. Who do you think it's going to be? That's a better bet.
Go ahead, Kim. I totally agree with where you're going, Kim. The cities can't get out of their own way.
They can't get out of their own way. Like the smaller cities can get through these things and they make these networks happen because they don't get into the political shit show that's out there. Unlike the big cities and all the lobbying efforts from a big city to do this would just be tremendous.
Yeah, the lobbying, even if the lobbying's not there. I mean, this is what I've observed from a couple of the larger cities, right? Let's say a situation in which either a city council or more likely a mayor comes in and they're hot to trot on this. One of the first things that happens is somebody who has no experience doing this gets put in charge of it because they're well connected. They're a friend of the mayor, or they're someone who's done something and somehow people think that they'll be good at it. And they come in and they maybe bring Doug in or one of Doug's rivals, the other consultants, and they have a report. And then one of the first things they do is they're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I work for this city. I'm not going to listen to Doug. He wears tie-dye shirts.
And then they hire the other consultant, and they tell them the same thing, and then they just shelf it. I mean, there were three mayors in a row in Seattle who ran on building broadband network. 3 of them in a row.
Yeah, and like one of them, I mean, like one of the first things they did was they basically commissioned a study, and they set the parameters of the study to ensure that the network was designed in a way that no one would ever design a network because it was insanely expensive. I mean, it was basically like, what if we just like spent a lot of money on equipment that nobody would use? And it turns out that if you build a network that way, it's uneconomical. And then they said, we really wanted to do it, but it's uneconomical. Sorry. I mean, but that's the sort of thing is that like you deal with that. There's Comcast and CenturyLink and the other companies are in there in Seattle. But even if they weren't, I still think this approach in which someone's friend gets put in charge of it, and then there's like the person who actually has been working on it for 5 years and is interested in it, they're buried 4 levels deep in the bureaucracy, and they never get to actually like inform anyone of what would be a rational plan.
So is it just
and let's speak.
Oh,
go ahead, Kim.
Well, I was going to say, let's speak that a mayor can come in and say whatever they want, but they really need the support of the city council. Like a mayor can grandstand.
It depends on the city, though. I mean, like in Minneapolis, I think I'm trying to remember. Minneapolis is a stronger mayor, I think. So St. Paul is. I mean, the mayor, they can pretty much stampede the city council if they need to. And in some cities, in other cities, the mayor's has much less power. But I think it really varies based on the state and the city.
Fair enough.
So are we just saying that the top 40 cities in this country will never get?
No, I don't think so. I think we're going to see something. I'm much more positive about this than Doug is.
50 cities, top 50.
If we say NFL, we're talking top 35, 40. So I just don't see any of them ever pulling the trigger. We'll see.
What are we talking about? A full citywide fiber to the home network? Are we talking about anything like Okay, full citywide fiber to home network. Like the term is going to have to be crazy for this bet, because even if you wanted to do it in LA and you started today and you had like what $1.52 billion, it still take you 10 years, 15 years, right?
Right.
Yeah, but if somebody starts, so we can count them as.
If somebody starts to build that and they've got all the money, that's a victory. So yeah.
So we're going to be on Connect This in 2030 talking about this bet again.
Let's see.
Well, it's what I've always wondering is we're talking about this digital.
I'll be 76. So I think I'll try.
But aren't these large cities where the big issue is?
Right. That's where it's not just redline. It's not redlined. It's 100,000 people redlined. I mean, that's where the big issue is.
So if a city, let's just say, like, I mean, there's some things that are going on. Doug, you're probably even more aware of them than I am, and just being quiet about it. But like, how about a city that builds out municipal fiber to public housing and connects 50, 60,000 people that way?
Oh, the whole bunch of that's going to happen with all this ARPA money. That's going to happen a lot. Yeah.
Ooh, I bet it. Let's bet, because I think what's going to happen is the cable companies are going to end up with the vast majority of it.
Oh, they may turn around and hand that fiber to the cable company, but the city's going to pay for it, and that way they're going to ensure that it gets done. So,
that's a brilliant idea. Let's use taxpayers' dollars and just hand an asset to a public company, because that's a great idea.
We've seen it in a couple of places, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, we have seen it. Yeah.
Ooh, I'll bet you all chicken wings that's what happens. So,
well, maybe they'll hand it. Maybe they'll hand it to you, Travis.
That's going to happen in some places, Travis. But like the question is,
they need
how many?
Results, and they need it quick. And the cable and telcos are in all these buildings already.
Right.
Even us or Kimberly, she has a build cost and a build timeline that doesn't meet the need.
Well, I think some of these cities. So here's the thing. First of all, How often do I say that? Like, we're seeing cities start to get educated on this now, right? I mean, like major cities in which they've been saying how it's important it is for all this time, and yet they still don't know anything about it. Doug, you talk to cities, right? How often do you run into a major city where you would expect that they would have a good sense of what's going on, and they don't know the difference between a lack of availability and a service that's too high?
Pretty much every time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that, like, I think part of this is like the people like me need to get off of screwing around with their friends online on television shows, and need to focus on educating the cities, because the cities are still they don't know the basic stuff that we've been talking about for 15 years.
But what are you going to educate them on?
I'm going to educate them on how to actually solve this problem in the long term, and that if you just give money to the cable companies, which we've seen elsewhere, that it doesn't actually result in serving the population that you once served.
But if I'm running for city council, or I'm running for mayor, how big of a topic is this? How big of a problem?
I mean, Travis, you and I have talked about this before. That crime is going to determine the races, and not whether or not, like, there's putting money into areas. I mean, we've talked about this before. In Minneapolis, there's not a single person on the council who believes that if they do something on broadband, they would get another vote.
Right. Yeah. I agree.
So that's
that's another reason why I don't think it will.
Sorry. That's why, we talk about this, but, I can see a lot of success in these smaller towns, but I'm always just curious if you're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you're in a low income neighborhood, what are the odds of you getting gigabit symmetrical fiber to the home?
Within the next 10 years, I think decent.
I'm taking the bet.
I'll take that.
Yeah, Chris, you are very optimistic today. Very optimistic today.
I'll even give them 10-1 on Pittsburgh. How's that?
Yeah. Just go down the NFL, right? And just go down the list.
Pittsburgh has 7 bridges, and it's all rock, and the poles are terrible. It's not a good place to build fiber.
All right, Denver, Colorado, Los Angeles, San Diego. Yeah,
I think we're going to see incremental efforts in these places where we have strategic people. I think there's going to be a shift. I think there's like these shifts, and one of the things that happens is just that, like, the people who are scared about this and don't get it and aren't intimidated, they're retiring, and some younger people come in some of these places. They're more aggressive, and I don't think they're going to bond and build out the entire city, but I think they're going to be like, like, for instance, let's just say that, like, city of like Salt Lake City, which is a bad example because I already have one, but if a city like Salt Lake City that's nearby another provider, and they're like, hey, like, we'll pay you to come in and to build this out and to operate it for us. I can see that happening. I really do think that this is something that's important enough to voters that it's going to be an issue. And eventually we'll see a shift on it in elected officials. Not everywhere.
But okay, so let's get Kim in here and ask her: is Salt Lake 100% covered with fiber right now?
Not with Utopia Fiber, but supposedly with another fiber provider. But I have no idea what their maps really look like.
Okay.
I can't trust Kim. Yeah. She stopped blinking an hour ago.
Yeah.
It's mesmerizing. It's truly mesmerizing.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that my mouth wasn't agape when that video.
Kim's actually wandering through the airport in the food court right now. Taking advantage of it. But Kim, I mean, like in Salt Lake City, do you see because this provider, even if they are serving 100% of the area, do you see the city of Salt Lake making investments into lower income neighborhoods and that changing the dynamic some?
No, not really. I don't think they would. I think they're gonna rely heavily on that provider to say they should make investment in the low income areas.
Because the dynamic that I think will develop in some areas, more than just a few, is that the city will start off by serving low income areas, and then others will say, hey, wait a minute, why are they getting the benefit and I'm not? Let's expand this, because like Doug is projecting, things are only going to get worse. And I fundamentally believe that as we approach $100 from the cable companies, there will be more and more pressure on city governments. We've already seen a shift over the past 5 years in terms of people being like, let's just get it done. We just need to do something. And I think that's what we're going to reverberate through.
Yeah. Well, there is one dynamic in your favor of your argument, and that once a city starts serving anybody, the pressure to serve everybody starts building.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely. Yeah.
And I think I live in Salt Lake, so maybe that was a bad example for you to say Salt Lake, because I think the politics wouldn't fly there. But in other major cities, like you were talking about, I can see that happening where you have a very high low income population.
Kim, so, I don't know Salt Lake as well. My sense of Salt Lake is that it's quite conservative, but it's also quite care for your neighbor. And so I'm kind of curious.
Absolutely. I mean, my neighbor still mows my grass, and we haven't figured out why. If I'm just a really crappy lawn maintaining my lawn, but it's very much that way. But I don't like the politics of where the money is going to go. Do they think that broadband is the most important investment when there's so much else that we need to work on, like homeless or whatnot? Mm-hmm. I just don't think it rises to the top of the list.
All right. So I will bet you, Chris, in the next year, there will be exactly 0 major metropolitan areas in the country that have an initiative to bring broadband to low-income neighborhoods.
Okay. So we're going to say by September.
I'll take that 30th. Bet. Buffalo's already doing it.
Oh, hold on. Is Buffalo? I'm talking to everybody, not just picking off a few MDUs.
Okay.
I'm talking up and down every street.
Oh, no. But Buffalo was tackling. You just said tackling the poor neighborhoods.
But you can't tackle it like 2% of it. I'm talking the whole thing.
Well, I would say let's keep an eye on Baltimore. I think they're a major city.
Redlining the redlined. Then what is the next level of?
No, I think part of this is also a question of, part of the work that I do is trying to how do we engage philanthropy? Because that's another piece that comes into this, which is if a city says, whoa, we have to act now because we have this opportunity to do this thing and philanthropy is going to really help move it, then it's a different thing. And I do think, it's not up and down every street, but I think there's neighborhoods in Baltimore that over the next several years will see a significant benefit. I think it will be through some kind of municipal investment. I don't know if it'll be a partner or not. I think there's other major cities that have significant poverty. Cities that we may not consider major because of the amount of people that have left there, but cities that have a significant in neighborhoods that have been left behind. I think we're going to see both partnerships and municipal investment in ways that we have not seen before to get them connected. And it's not just giving money to an existing cable company.
I've predicted all along that we're going to have major, I believe the philanthropy. I think we're going to see nonprofit and co-ops in the poor neighborhoods in a lot of cities. I think that's. I
need to ask a question, and it's very serious. So you ready for this? I think we need to connect this to recap all the bets that have gone on just this podcast.
Well, I mean, we have to. I think we've only had one serious bet. We have to be very careful about the terms and everything else. And I'm interested. Maybe Travis and I can hash out this, and we'll cement it in the next show next weekend.
Well, why don't we need a board? All you need is a board behind you, where we can write them down, so every show people can see the outstanding bets. Yeah,
right.
There will be billions of dollars of all these programs, right? I mean, how many bazillions of dollars are the federal government going to pump into broadband?
And in excess of 100. I would say that there's an excess of $100 billion this year that is available that could reasonably be used for broadband, because we wouldn't expect all of the money that has multiple uses to be used for broadband, but that's easily more than $100 billion.
And how many low-income neighborhoods in the United States will be 100% covered? Because it has to be the same as cable or your twisted pair network. I mean, you can't just cherry pick 4 MDUs and say you did an amazing job. How many low-income neighborhoods in this country will be served out of $100 billion of spending?
It's a hard question, Travis. No, it's not 0. I would say 5.
Okay, I would like to go
5 of the top 50 markets.
I'd like to go visit one that's actually done.
Oh, this is great. Let's do it. Let's plan on doing that. We'll come back to it because Travis, you and I have to do more traveling. In fact, Kim and I want to make sure you go to Mountain Connect next year with us.
0, and I'm not talking 4 MDUs on a block. I'm talking.
I appreciate that, but let's also be clear. It's $100 billion. The vast majority of it can only be used in rural areas or areas that don't have cable coverage. So it's also a slightly different question.
Why is that? Who made that rule up? By the way,
the cable and telephone companies made that rule.
Cable companies did. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, then they're geniuses.
They are. Yeah. When it comes to not being competed against, they are geniuses. So.
Yeah, I mean, good for them. Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up here, and Doug, I do also want to bring you in. I feel like we have to find a show that you and Kim are already going to, and then Travis and I will road trip to it. I will allow Travis to drive me across the country in his RV.
That is not a safe thing. That is not a safe idea.
Is he going to be getting Starlink in that RV? I forget.
Well,
next year, I'll bet he does.
No, LTE is terrible. So whoever thinks, it's worse than you can even imagine in reality. So any WISP or ISP out there that thinks that the LTE networks are going to take over, don't worry. It's not. It's ridiculously bad.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
but I'm leaning toward Mountain Connect. Otherwise, we have to find a show, and then we're gonna figure out how to make sure they let us do a live Connect This from the stage.
I don't know if anybody's ready for that, but I'm all down.
I want to thank you all. I'm really looking forward to next week. Next week, we're going to be back. We're probably going to have Travis and I live with my colleagues all gathered in one spot with big buckets of popcorn to throw at us while we're talking. They'll be asking more questions, I hope. We're going to dive and really focus on permitting and rights of way. We have a specific use case, as Travis is going to talk about challenges in terms of transitioning from Minneapolis to some of the other towns around, which have different permitting approaches, some of which need some updating. And we're going to try and talk about this issue in a way that others haven't, in terms of not just saying that cities are dumb or providers are lazy and greedy, but we're really focusing on what works, what doesn't work, and things like that. So thank you so much, Doug. Thank you, Frozen Kim.
Well, I just wanted to let Kim know we're going to be doing all the talking next week, because those two will be eating chicken wings during the whole show.
I know, it's true. But if they can find them, supply chain issues, folks.
Oh, I'm going to start looking. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out for how great public Wi-Fi is, just in case anybody wants to know. So
your audio's only had problems like glitched 2 or 3 times. It's been pretty good from that angle.
So fair enough. Well, I'm excited for next week.
Mr. Co-host, thank you.
Thank you. Well done, Mr. Mitchell. And I look forward to next week's government program of the week that I don't know about. So
this has been an episode of Connect This. Look forward to